You continue under oath, Mr. Gopal?
Yes, my lord.
Mr. Ronnie?
As the court pleases. Lord, if I may just deal with a few issues that arose from the evidence before lunch. We canvassed the question of why Mr. Gopal was not afforded representation at state expense. Lord, I was contacted by Advocate Singh of the NPA who offered some clarification, and my Lord, I believe I'm duty bound to put that clarification before the court.
Yeah.
So according to Advocate Shubman Singh, the NPA in fact did recommend to the state attorney that Mr. Gopal be afforded legal representation. However, the state attorney declined to provide legal representation on the grounds that they believed Mr. Gopal was not a suspect. Advocate Singh is of the view, and I completely agree, that the state attorney erred in reaching that conclusion. Nonetheless, once they had made that decision, Advocate Singh and the NPA then arranged pro bono representation for Mr. Gopal, and the affidavit that was taken from him was settled in the presence of his counsel. So, my Lord, just to be clear, Advocate Singh and the NPA acted perfectly ethically in the circumstances, but what can be called into question is the refusal of the state attorney to afford representation. They clearly made a mistake in that regard, my Lord, and perhaps that should be communicated in some form to them. Mr. Gopal, before lunch we were talking about your, well, not your statement, but rather the notes that had been taken following a discussion with you. Just to remind the court, that's Exhibit G27, page 1785. And you drew our attention to that paragraph on page 1787, the last page, where the question of paying your costs was apparently raised.
Sorry, my lord. I'm sorry to interrupt my colleague at this stage. However, having come very late into the matter and having been instructed quite late into the matter, I need to establish whether this particular exhibit has been introduced for the first time into the record. Was it put to other witnesses?
Sorry, which exhibit?
G26, G27, and I think L1.
Yeah.
Yes. My lord, has it been introduced previously into the
Well, it
record?
is part of the exhibits that were handed in, probably before your arrival.
Okay. And was it put to any of the other witnesses?
Sorry?
Was it put to any other witnesses?
No. Some witnesses, I think, were asked about this, but there's very little information that came out of it until Mr. Gopal came to testify, because it mentions his name, obviously. He might have some knowledge about how it came about that this information was put down to writing.
Was it put to Mr. Haffejee, Yusuf Haffejee? Oh, he's late. Oh, thank you. Thank you, my lord. Thank you for that point of clarification.
All right.
Thank you. My
Just
apologies.
to assist my learned colleague further, it was not only was it part of the record to begin with as G27, but it was also put up as Exhibit L1. And we did canvass the document with Dr. Haffergy's sister, Sarah Haffejee,
Yes.
who said that she had found it amongst the belongings of Yusuf Haffejee
Yeah.
and handed it over to the instructing attorney, and then we put it up as an exhibit. And she confirmed in her evidence that she discovered the document while going through,
Yeah.
I believe, a cupboard in Yusuf Haffejee's room.
Yes.
So, Mr. Gopal, you have denied seeking any money or recompense for providing information. Now, I must bring to your attention that during the lunch period, my instructing attorney was contacted by a witness who has testified before this court. That's Dr. K.V. Naidu. K.V. Woodley. And Dr. K.V. Woodley will be making out a short affidavit in this regard, which we will put before your lordship as soon as we can. But the gist of what he'll be saying, which I must put to you, is that he says Yusuf Haffejee told him that he had been approached by you and you had asked him for a sum of money to expose the truth, and that the sum of money you had asked for was between 5 and 10,000 rands for the information. And according to Dr. Mudley, Mr. Yusuf Haffejee said he refused to pay you any such money and said you must go to the TRC. What is your response to that?
That is a lie, my lord.
So you have no further comment on that?
I have no further comment on that. That is a lie.
It's your evidence that at no point during your conversation with the late Yusuf Haffejee you asked for any money or compensation?
I did not ask him for no compensation, no money.
Right. In due course we will put up the affidavit from Dr. Mudley. And he is overseas at the moment, so we will get a scanned copy and then we will ask for the original to be couriered.
My lord, might I just say that I do not know of any Dr. Mudley in this investigation. I never came across any Dr. Mudley, so I don't know where this is coming from, but nevertheless, I've answered. My lord?
Is that the witness who testified from Croatia?
He did testify from Croatia.
Oh, yes. He was on holiday or something.
I think he might have been working, or he was on holiday, but he certainly was in Croatia when he testified, yeah.
No, I remember.
Mr. Gopal, if we can then turn to the statement you made to the TRC. And that's also G26, page 1766. That was a statement made on 18 April 1997. You've already said in the evidence in chief what your duties were, so we won't deal with that. But I see in paragraph 2 you say you in fact did have a certain specialization in the security branch, and that initially you focused on the activities of the ANC, PAC, the ZAPA and NIC, that's Natal Indian Congress, but you eventually specialized in the ZAPO. Do you recall approximately when you shifted focus to a Zappo?
When I shifted focus to a Zappo.
When you began to specialize on a Zappo?
I think it was the early 80s. I think the early 80s.
Early 80s, okay.
Yeah. Around there.
And if we can turn to paragraph 3, where you outline your the way detainees were routinely interrogated, and you point out that if they didn't cooperate within the first 48 hours, you would apply for special authority under Section 10 of the Internal Security Act to hold them for a longer period. And then you point out ways of obtaining the information that you wanted, and that was to assault or torture the suspects. And this took several forms: psychological breakdown, sleep deprivation, continuous interrogation over a period of days, and then physical assault and torture, which included minor assaults such as slapping, and major assault such as panel beating and kicking. And in your evidence in chief, you've in fact expanded on that list. So my question, Mr. Gopal, were you involved in any of these forms of abuse?
No, not at all.
Because in that statement you say one of the ways of obtaining information that we wanted was to assault.
I understand what your worship is saying, but when I say we, I'm referring to members of the branch who were involved in interrogations. I wasn't involved in interrogations. Very junior constable, just 1 and 3/4 years experience.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about through your entire career at the security branch.
Okay, no, I did not assault anyone.
You didn't assault a single person at any point?
Not a single person.
During your entire career at the security branch?
My entire career with the security police.
You weren't involved in any deprivation of sleep?
I, for myself.
On a detainee, preventing a detainee from sleeping?
I know detainees were, like some of them were interrogated for very long hours, but I did not personally, because I'm not in charge of detainees to interrogate detainees. That's the white hierarchy.
And are you're saying that when it comes to assault, even the minor assaults such as slapping?
Oh no, not at all.
So not even the odd slap?
Not even an odd slap.
In paragraph 4 of that statement, you make the point that you were aware that a lot of African activists were assaulted very badly when I served at Fisher Street offices, and presumably you were aware of that because you were present when those African activists were assaulted.
Okay, I was present when Joseph Mdudley was assaulted, right? But then as far as the rest of them were concerned, we used to hear, well, I used to hear news through the grapevine, so to speak, that some detainees, I'm trying to recall the names, but it's just too far way back, that African detainees were being assaulted. Some of them even mentioned their names to me, but passage of time has, taken control of me. And yes, there were lots of African detainees who were assaulted. That's what I learned.
And then you then go on to say, to the best of my knowledge, the majority of assaults were carried out by members with the full knowledge of the commanding officers. Would I be right in saying not just the full knowledge of the commanding officers, with their approval?
Well, the whites were mostly involved in, whites and some African members were involved in interrogation and assaulting. And I believe that the full command of the full knowledge of the commanding officer, like for example Colonel Kutsia, because he was present during Joseph Lully's assault. So he is like deputy in charge of the security branch, and he's not only aware of that, but yeah, not only full knowledge, but as what Mr. Vanya put it. Yes.
Yes, so it wasn't as if they were just turning a blind eye. This is what they expected their subordinates to do.
The commanding officers?
Yes.
Yes.
People like Brigadier Steenkamp and Colonel Kutsia.
Yes.
They wanted their subordinates to apply the third degree to these detainees to extract information.
Well, obviously, I mean, it stands to reason, my lord, that if the commanding officers did not approve of such an act, then none of the members would commit assault. I truly believe that they not only had full knowledge of it, but agreed upon it.
Yes. And if they disapproved of it and made that disapproval known, then it would have been somewhat easier for somebody like you to report to them of what was in fact going on.
Sorry?
If they had disapproved of torture and assault and instructed their members, don't ever do this,
Yes.
and it did happen,
Yes.
then it would have been a little easier for someone like you to approach the superiors and say, they're disobeying your order.
Yeah, in other words, if they had committed an assault, knowing very well that the commanders told them not to commit assaults, yes, sure. I mean, I would have reported that. I mean, that's common sense, my lord.
So I want to put to you an extract from an affidavit made by James Burrow Taylor, Jimmy Taylor, as you know him.
Yes.
My lord, this actually comes from the Taylor police file, which we only received, I believe, yesterday. So it's not yet an exhibit.
Yeah.
It's a pretty thick file. So I think we're just going to put up the affidavit in question. And it's an undated affidavit by James Taylor in his application for medical discharge. I should also say that the copy we have is unsigned as well. At page 10, paragraph 23 of this affidavit, we should be aware that when you apply for medical discharge, you have to make out a case to show that if it's on emotional or mental grounds, that you've been through a great deal of trauma and the like.
Okay.
So I suppose it should be seen in that context. But the extract from paragraph 23 on page 10 is as follows. The security branch were often ordered to arrest and detain individuals about whom they knew very little, or whom they considered to be of no or little consequence. These detentions were often recommended or requested by other intelligence agencies, were often to be followed by long periods of interrogation based on the flimsiest of intelligence or information provided by the agency concerned. The security branch interrogator was then expected by seniors and politicians to deliver the goods, so to speak. Would you agree with that comment by James Taylor?
I'm trying to understand what he meant by what he said. Is it possible to put that in simpler terms, my lord?
Yes, so what he's basically saying is that the security branch members were placed under huge pressure by their commanding officers and by the politicians above them, I suppose, to get answers and to get results. And often they were given the flimsiest of information, sometimes by other agencies. Or they had gathered their own flimsy intelligence, and they were then expected to extract intelligence from these detainees because they were required to deliver the goods.
Okay, so it's the first time that I hear that a security branch like Jimmy Taylor, for example, had to receive intelligence from other agencies to commit an investigation and interrogation on somebody who was in security detention, and also to get, if I read you correctly, instructions from higher up politicians. That's what you mentioned. Well, that's new to me. If he is saying so in his affidavit, my lord, I cannot comment on that.
Well, it wasn't necessarily instructions. He talks about an expectation by seniors and politicians to deliver the goods. So I think what he's saying is they were under pressure by their commanding officers, who in turn were under pressure by the politicians to deliver the goods. In other words, to deal with the troublemakers.
Well, my lord, I've got to be honest and say that is news to me. I've got to say as well that we used to always work on a need-to-know basis. So what you don't need to know, it's not told out to you. But this is news to me. This is something new
Yes. Although what he's saying does have a little bit of a ring of truth, though. I mean, I don't think it can be disputed that politicians and senior officers in agencies such as the security branch expected those on the front line, like yourself, to deliver the goods. They expected you to gather intelligence. They expected you to extract usable information from your suspects.
If James Taylor, if Jimmy Taylor could have specified some names of suspects, etc., then I would know if I were part of the interrogation team or not.
No, you missed the point, Mr. Gopal. We're not talking about any particular case. We're just talking about the general practice, the general expectation. Let me put it to you another way. Have you not been involved in a case where you have suspicions about a particular person, but not enough intelligence, and together with your colleagues you detain the person in order to extract something out of that person, something you can use?
Well, Lord, the non-white members, it's got to be stated here very clearly, very, very clearly, my Lord. The non-white members, I'm specifically referring to Indian members, right? Well, Lord, they were handpicked. Some of them were handpicked in terms of, for example, if you want to interrogate a certain person whom you suspect that might be involved in a certain activity, then they'd go to say shoot governor because he's got more experience than me in the branch. You'd go to somebody with experience. If they feel that they need somebody senior than Sergeant Governor, then they go to Major Benjamin. Stuff like that. So I for myself never came across a situation where I had to personally pick up somebody who's involved in suspicious activity and then interrogating and then realize that there's nothing in it. So that's how I can answer the question.
Yes. But you're not disputing that was the modus operandi of the security branch, which was to often pick up individuals because they had draconian powers on the law to do so.
Sure, no,
and to try to extract information out of them which they don't currently have.
I wouldn't dispute that.
Yes, of course not.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, Mr. Gopal, wasn't that in fact the case here with Dr. Haffergy? But in fact, you didn't have enough on him to charge him, which appears to be your evidence, if I understood it from this morning. Is that correct? There wasn't enough to charge him?
Well, if there was enough information to charge him, then Jimmy Taylor, P.L. Detroit, Colonel Kutsia would have opened up a docket.
Indeed. So, because you didn't have sufficient intelligence or evidence, whatever it might be, to charge him,
Yes.
to implicate him, that's the reason why Jimmy Taylor and Detroit had to extract the admissions and the information from him and to use the third degree.
I understand. Yes, I understand that, my lord.
Yes.
Sorry?
I understand that, my lord.
I thought that was your evidence. That indeed, in the case of Dr. Haffergy,
Yes.
you still had to extract more information that could sustain a charge. Because you made an example of the material to be used for bombing and those minor details. You still had to get that from him, and
Yes.
he was not forthcoming with all of that.
Absolutely not, my lord.
So it is your evidence
Yes.
that indeed it was to extract information from him.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, my lord.
And which is why he was so badly tortured.
Absolutely, my lord.
So yes, we will return to that point in due course. Mr. Gopal, if I can draw your attention to your big statement at G26. My lord, that's at page 1724 of the record. Now, you've already indicated to the court that
That's truthful. Yes, sir.
okay. So I'm just looking at paragraph 3. And in your evidence in chief, you explained that this statement was made for purposes of section 204. We don't need to revisit that because that has been thoroughly dealt with. In your evidence before lunch, you also indicated to the court that it's your intention to answer all questions honestly because you have nothing to hide.
Yes.
So I'm just curious because in that paragraph 3, you say the following: I'm fully aware that the statement which I'm about to make may incriminate me with regard to the offences of at least attempted murder, kidnapping, and or defeating and obstructing the course of justice. So, in relation to those particular crimes, attempted murder, kidnapping, obstructing the course of justice, why did you say that you're fully aware that you may be incriminated in those charges in making your statement?
Well, that's how it was put to her. That's how it was put to me. This is how Advocate Shabnam Singh had tapped this out. And it's there. It's part of my affidavit.
Yes, but you read it and you agreed with everything in it, sure?
Yes.
Yes, so
Yes.
you do agree with that?
Yes, certainly.
Right.
Yes.
So how could you possibly incriminate yourself in relation to, say, for example, attempted murder?
Well, that's how it was put in the affidavit. When I had initially started off making my affidavit with her, I told her that Dr. Haffergy was not arrested, he was kidnapped. I said that, because that is the truth. He was not arrested in terms of the formal method of arresting by police officials. So kidnapping is there.
Yes, I think that one's clear. I mean, we
Yes.
understand that one, sure.
Yes, yes. Defeating and obstructing the course of justice. Obviously, if I'm going to state something and I'm going to defeat and obstruct the course of justice in the making of this affidavit, then I'll be guilty of that. As far as attempted murder is concerned, if this affidavit proves that I'm guilty of the crime of attempted murder, then they must go ahead and prosecute me.
So it's a possibility that you accept.
By all means.
So certainly in relation to kidnapping, I think as you've explained, he was effectively abducted, he wasn't arrested, there was no paperwork involved, at least not until midnight. And then defeating and obstructing the course of justice, well, we now know that you were asked to collaborate in the cover-ups of certain aspects. And you
Yes,
did.
sure.
Yeah. Although, as we pointed out, that particular crime has prescribed, at least in relation to what you did back in the late 1970s. But now, returning to attempted murder, why would it be attempted murder? What attempted murder took place?
What attempted murder took place?
Yes, because if anything
trying
happened,
to
it wasn't
assault-
attempted murder, it was murder.
Yes, but
Dr. Haffergy ended up dead, so
yes, but now what I'm saying is that when you're assaulting someone so seriously, right, and if the person did not die, then then there's an attempt made to murder that person, because that type of assault, it's not one or two slaps, it's not one or two touch taps. This is brutal assault, very brutal, and that can be construed as you're trying to kill that person. That's attempted murder. Possible. Look, it's just, look, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an advocate, but it's like my common understanding of what I'm saying.
yes, but it's clear that the subject in question, Dr. Haffergy, didn't survive. If he had survived, then I would agree with you. Then the possibility is the charge is attempted murder.
Yes, yes,
But it's all common cause, no dispute.
yes,
He died,
yes,
and he was found dead.
yes.
So it can't be attempted murder. It can only be murder.
Well, this is how it was typed in over there by Advocate Shabnam, and I just read it and I accepted it. I mean, I'm not there to dispute anything that she says. I did not find anything wrong in what she did.
Well, again, it's your statement which you read
Yes, no, sure,
and
sure.
signed.
I agree.
So, Mr. Gavani, just to be fair to this witness about the attempted murder, could one not consider this to be included in case it is found there was suicide, but from the evidence it shows that he had been severely assaulted, that these people intended to kill this person, as he's trying to explain, that if they say the cause of death was something different, but the evidence shows that whoever was doing this, whatever he was doing, could amount to an attempt to kill the person, as they say. So maybe that is why attempted murder is included there.
Yes, that's
If one looks at the facts of what happened,
indeed.
obviously, if we find the cause of death was not suicide, then one gets to the murder part.
Yes, my lord. I certainly concede that that's at least a possibility. It is the evidence of Mr. Gopal, as I understand it, and your canvas up with him again, that in his view, Dr. Haffergy didn't commit suicide.
Yeah.
And if he didn't commit suicide, then it can only be murder. So in the light of what my lord has said, we accept that is at least a possibility.
Sure.
But the other possibility, which in our view I think is a stronger possibility, is that attempted murder should have read just murder or in addition to attempted murder, there should have been a potential murder charge inserted there.
Does it not say, sorry. It says, incriminate me with regard to the offenses of at least attempted murder. Well, I believe that murder should have been included.
Yes, okay, good. All right, we can move on. Well, just perhaps to round up. So, at the time of making this statement, you were aware, given what you've just indicated, that there was the possibility that you could be exposed to a potential murder charge.
Yes.
And why?
And why?
Why murder? Why could you be exposed to a murder charge?
Can't really comment on that. I believe that, honestly and truly, Dr. Haffergy did not hang himself. There's no ways in which he had the energy to even kill himself. So the question arises, if he died there, and if he did not commit suicide, then it's homicide or what? Is it murder? So if that is the case, if that's been investigated, my being part of the interrogation team, then the possibility of my being charged for murder does exist.
Yes. Now, when you were making up this Section 204 statement,
Yes.
was it ever put to you who might in fact be charged for crimes relating to the death of Dr. Haffergy?
No, my lord.
Because certainly when you started speaking to the NPA, I think you mentioned that just the discussion started perhaps in 2017 and went through 2018, and then finally the statement was signed in April of 2019.
Yes.
And certainly through those years, at least one prime suspect, namely Jimmy Taylor,
Yes.
was still alive.
Jimmy Taylor was alive. I think Captain P.L. Detroit, when did he pass on?
I think he had passed away, my team will tell me, but I think it was around 2005 or 2006.
Okay. Well, at least Jimmy Taylor was alive, because he only passed away around about the 15th or the 19th of August 2019.
Yes, Taylor only died in August of 2019.
Okay, so this statement of mine was signed off on when the 2nd of April, am I right?
That's right.
2019. 2nd of April, so it's May, June, July, August, just after four months. 4 months after my statement.
Yes, no, the point I'm making is that he died after the statement was signed.
Yes.
And when you first started talking to the NPA,
Yes.
it was a few years prior to that.
Yes. He was
So
alive.
am I correct in saying that at that point in time the NPA had the possibility in their mind that you could testify against Jimmy Taylor?
Yes.
And that really was why they wanted you as a true or false witness. If you testified honestly, then you would be immunized from any criminal charge in relation to the death.
Sure.
Now, since your discussions began in 2017, did you ever wonder why they never acted against him before he eventually died in August of 2019?
Why they did not act against him? Well, I guess, whilst the NPA is taking down my affidavit, they gotta have like a complete affidavit, so to speak, to formulate the right charge against Jimmy Taylor. But Jimmy Taylor was already a suspect, besides Jimmy Taylor, the others, right? But in order to convict Jimmy Taylor, I guess they needed my full affidavit to see how far I go with the Haffejee investigations, to see Jimmy Taylor's involvement, etc., etc. And once they have a proper docket, once they have a proper affidavit, they can be submitted, and then he can be arrested, and so on, prosecuted and stuff.
Right, I simply ask because you're probably aware that very, very few apartheid-era perpetrators have been held to book. Have been held to account in a criminal court.
To accountability?
Yes.
Very few?
Very few indeed.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier that and it's in your statement, it's at paragraph 29, page 1735, that you had occasion to study a number of police files. And in paragraph 29, you give a number of examples.
17, 20, 27.
So that's paragraph 29. It's at page 1735 of the record.
Paragraph 29.
It's okay, you don't really have to read that. In that paragraph you mentioned that you studied the files of people like Fatima Mia, Helen Suzman, I presume that's Albert Lutuli and others. You also mentioned in your evidence in chief that there was a file on Dr. Hoosen Haffejee. Did you ever get to see the file on Dr. Haffergy?
1977.
In 1977?
Yeah, well, the file started off with Jimmy Taylor, myself, Pierre Detroit, Major Ben, Shrewd, whatever investigations that's been done, we put investigation diaries, each one of us, and put them into, and then we compile the file. And that's how the file gets compiled.
All right, so you were involved in actually opening the file and building it up?
Well, I wouldn't say open the file, but building it up, yes.
Because from what I understand, the investigating officers advise us that they have requested that file and they have searched for it, but it's nowhere to be found.
Sorry, my lord, when you say investigating officers?
In this inquest.
In this inquest,
in this
okay.
Inquest, they've attempted to locate that file, but it can't be found.
In the archives in Pretoria?
I'm assuming, and we'll double check again with the investigating officer, but I'm assuming from the archive in Pretoria.
Yes, well, hopefully that they can find that, because that will bring about a whole other chapter, because it's in writing whatever's over there. But if it's not found there, then obviously it's been destroyed, right? 1977, the local file at the security branch. Okay, just before the amalgamation, my lord, the local files at the Durban offices, they were taken out, and I believe they were taken to the Lion Match Factory in Amgeni Road, because they have these huge, humongous sized furnaces, and burnt in there.
And how do you know that?
Because whilst I was with National Intelligence, I heard, I mean, we get news filtering between intelligence organizations. So it came through.
I see.
And that was what happened throughout South Africa. Where not only furnaces we used to burn files, but then shredders, and then burn whatever's shredded.
So you're suggesting, and I suppose it's a real possibility, that amongst the many files, either shredded or burnt at the Lion Match Factory,
yes,
could have been the file of Dr. Haffergy?
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, then obviously we're not going to get our hands on it.
But I believe that if there's a file up in Pretoria, then certainly if a thorough search is conducted.
Yes. No, we'll double check, and I'm sure my learned friend for the state will speak with his investigators and perhaps come back to the court on that question. So am I right in saying that the file would have been opened shortly after the informer Mati Govender approached the security branch?
I would expect the file to have been opened the very same day.
Right. And I'm also correct in saying that prior to Mati Govender approaching the security branch, you had never heard of Hoosen Haffejee?
Not at all.
So without the information supplied, without Mati Govender becoming a paid informant for the security branch, you would agree that Dr. Haffergy wouldn't have been arrested and may very well have been alive today.
Absolutely.
Now, if I can draw your attention, and I'm just jumping several pages in your affidavit, to paragraph 37 on page 1738. There you make mention of further types of torture that took place in interrogations. And on the next page, that's 1739, paragraph 38. You say suspects would be assaulted with rubber batons, truncheons, as well as electric shocks. And these shocks would be administered to the groin, nipples, skin, at the back of the head. It would leave the suspect disoriented. Electric shocks would also be administered on the side of the person's body, his lower back, middle and upper back. The expert report of Dr. Naidu does refer to marks which, in his view, could have been electrodes, which raises the possibility that he was subjected to electric shock treatment.
Dr. Naidu is a pathologist.
He's an expert pathologist who appears on behalf of the family.
Expert pathologist, yes. My Lord, I do not have any pathology knowledge. I'm not an expert. I can't testify as to how an expert sees in his knowledge, in his education, sees what he says. I'm not an expert.
No. My question to you is not. I don't want you to comment on his expertise and how he reached such a conclusion. And it's not conclusive. He's simply saying that the marks could have been. You can't say with 100% certainty.
Okay.
So my question to you is, while you were present,
yes,
were any electric shocks administered to Dr. Haffergy?
No, not at all, my Lord.
But it's also true to say that you weren't present all the time during the interrogation.
Yeah, because I'd gone out for lunch break and I'd come back, and Gavin had gone out and then he'd come back, and then Jimmy Taylor and Detroit, they would leave and they come back.
And how long in total were you outside the interrogation room?
Probably about half an hour, 45 minutes, plus minus.
Right. Well, I suppose certain things could have happened in your absence.
Possible.
And while we're on that page, you say the following in paragraph 39. I was also present when Joseph Ndluli was interrogated. The interrogation itself was led by Colonel Kutsia, who was accompanied by Sergeants Mtembu, Ngobisa and Ntuli. Mr. Ndluli was severely assaulted and beaten with a baton and electrocuted. He was arrested because he had allegedly provided transportation for terrorists from abroad. Now, in the light of that statement, the evidence that you gave yesterday, that you simply were walking past the interrogation room and heard a commotion and stopped and went inside to see what was happening, that can't be correct, can it?
Well, that is correct, because that's what really started my going up there. And then when I did get there, I saw the surveyor. I saw him being severely beaten. I did see a generator over there, not to say no. And that's when I went and I reported the matter to Major Ben. And he asked me to keep away from that office. You work on a need-to-know basis. You don't need to know. Do not go back there. So it's not a case where I did not witness Joseph Ndluli being assaulted by Sergeant Mtembu.
No, my question is not that. I'm not suggesting you didn't witness the assault. I'm just questioning whether you simply walked past and saw what was happening when you peeked in, or whether in fact you were part of that interrogation and you saw what happened because you were present during the interrogation.
Yes, no, what I'm saying, what I meant, put it to you this way, is that when I heard the screams coming up from the office, so I popped in there and I stood, I waited there. It's not just that I just looked and just walked away. No, I stood there, I looked, I saw what was going on. And then in my mind I told myself, no, this is not right, this is wrong. So I walked away from there. I was probably there about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, which is quite long. No one clearly, Colonel Kutsia did not ask me to leave the office, neither did any one of the other interrogators ask me to leave the office. I left on my own accord and I reported myself to Major Ben. So this is what I've seen. So if that puts me as becoming part of the interrogators, if the court wants to read it that way, by all means, but I will not deny that.
So, at least Joseph Ndluli died on the 19th of March, 1976. At that point in time, you were a young constable.
Very much so.
21, 22.
Let's see.
Well, we know you were in your early 20s, you were young.
I was 23.
And how long had you been in the security branch by then?
About 1.5 years.
Right. So you were one of the most junior members, as well, as you say, something of a second-class officer, given that you were Indian. And yet, you were able just to open a door and march into an interrogation room and just stand there and watch for 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, plus minus 3 minutes, could be more, could be slightly less. But what I'm saying is that when you hear someone screaming from an office, at one moment in time it's quiet, you're not hearing nothing. Then you hear a scream and you hear a thumping sound. And then when I kicked the door, because the door was slightly ajar, I kicked it slightly and I pushed my head in, and then I saw what I saw. And I waited there and I could actually see what was taking place. So I then reported that immediately to Major Ben, because Major Ben's office is diagonally across that interrogation room.
You see, please help us, Mr. Gopal. You've already said that the security branch operated on a need-to-know basis, and you were not meant to be involved in things that did not concern you.
Yes.
You were a young Indian constable of the lowest rank possible. Yet you march into an office where there is torture ongoing and an investigation where, on your version, you were not involved in. Why didn't they simply say, "Excuse me, what are you doing here? Get the hell out"?
Who told me that? No.
I'm asking, how come they didn't throw you out
It didn't happen.
and have words with you?
It didn't happen. It did not happen. I was curious when I hear screams and when they are shouting going on, then I'm curious. What's going on? I'm brand spanking new, so to say, as a police officer, and I hear this. So despite my being in the lower ranks and the juniorest of person, treated like a third-class citizen, but despite all of that, I was curious. So I went into that office. I kicked the door. The door was ajar, so I kicked the door slightly, and I stepped in. And nobody stopped me. Colonel Kutsia was there.
So are you saying it was okay for individuals who are not involved in an interrogation, and even for a junior Indian constable, to walk into an interrogation room where he doesn't belong, he's not involved, and to stand there for 3 minutes? Is that normal?
They never objected to that. Nobody objected to that. And I was left standing there. Nobody said no.
Yes,
nobody told me to
I have
leave.
to say, I just find that hard to accept. And I think it's more probable, Mr. Gopal, that you witnessed the interrogation, you witnessed the ill treatment of Mr. Mluli, because you were connected to that interrogation.
No, my lord, that is a lie. That is a lie.
So you have all this information. You say in your statement, I was present. I was also present when Mluli was interrogated. You're able to say who the interrogation was led by, who was there. You give the detail on how he was assaulted. You're even able to tell us why he was arrested. And yet you had nothing to do with that investigation.
Yes, absolutely, because from what I can recall, they were questioning Joseph Mduli about how he had transported, freedom fighters, but they were referred to as terrorists those days. I think it was from Swaziland into South Africa by vehicle. How he had done that, and they kept on asking him about that. So that's how I learned about that.
And then paragraph 58, at the bottom of that paragraph on page 1747. In that paragraph, you've given a really graphic account of what Dr. Haffergy was subject to. On the bottom line, you say, I was fairly new at that stage as a junior constable and had seen interrogations, including those of Joseph Mluli. But in comparison, the assault on Haffergy was the worst I'd ever seen. It was the most severe. And yet you're able to make that comparison even though you were only in that office. On your version, you just peeked in, you were only there for a few minutes, and yet you're able to say that the Haffergy interrogation was way worse than the Mluli.
Yes. Yes, my lord.
You see, I have difficulty with that, because on your version, you were in the Haffergy interrogation room for virtually all the time, except for going out for lunch.
Yes.
Here you were only in there for a few minutes, yet you're able to say that what Haffergy experienced was way worse than Mluli.
Yes.
Do you know how Mluli died?
I'm not too certain, my lord. I think the story that was going around that time, maybe it slipped on piece of soap whilst having a shower and knocked his head on the floor and passed on. But that was the type of story that's flying around in the newspapers. I could be wrong. I speak in the correction. I don't know the truth of how he died.
Well, there certainly have been police fabrications about slipping on pieces of soap in showers, but as far as we are aware, that fabrication wasn't put up in this case.
Okay.
Another fabrication was put up, which I'll put to you shortly. Do you know where he died?
No, my lord.
According to the information at our disposal, he died in Hoosen Haffejee at Fisher Street.
Okay. I accept.
So it appears he died in the interrogation room itself.
Okay, I accept what you're saying, my lord.
And the version of the police is that he had a scuffle with the security branch members in the interrogation room, and that in that scuffle he fell against a chair and in so doing hit his head and chest on a door and then died.
Oh, no, that is... Sorry, I don't mean to smile or laugh, but that is truly... It's unbelievable, my lord. It's unbelievable. I saw him being assaulted. And then to say that he slipped against a chair and then hit his head against a door and then he fell and died.
Well, that's the version of the police, and as we know, the people involved got away from it. Got away with it. They were acquitted
okay.
of culpable homicide.
Okay. Well, the police version is not always the right version, especially with the security branch.
Yes, and not that I want to make light of it, but that's putting it mildly. Just dealing with Mighty Governor again, you give an account of you first met her in paragraph 44. And you indicate that she reported Haffejee to the security branch because she was fed up with Dr. Haffergy, because he was involved in a relationship with another Muslim girl named Shaida. So would I be correct in saying, or rather would it be your view, that Mighty Governor was reporting Dr. Haffergy because she was seeking revenge?
Very much so. She was very, very vengeful.
And she was not coming forward in order to play her part in protecting the public safety.
Protecting the public safety, I'm trying to understand.
She didn't come to the security branch because she was concerned about perhaps bombs going off, or she wanted to protect lives and property.
No, she came forth because she wanted to use the word burn, to burn Dr. Haffergy.
Yes.
In other words, to spy on him to the security police, because she had a grudge against him. She was very, very vengeful. She was very bitter. Very bitter.
Yes. So she wasn't acting in the public interest. It was out of pure personal malice and spite.
It's a personal vendetta.
Now you mentioned in paragraph 47 that that's on page 1742, the next page at the bottom, that the security branch decided to hotwire his flat. And this operation went on for about 4 months. And you also tapped the landline at his place of employment and placed a tomato on the ceiling. And that you listened to all the conversations at his flat. And I think it's your evidence that when you were not able to listen, you read the transcripts that Jimmy Taylor had made. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, over the 4 months, did you ever hear anything that piqued your interest? And were you able to say, goodness gracious, this is incriminating. What this doctor is up to is unlawful. And bring that specifically to the attention of your superiors.
Well, what I had heard was Dr. Haffergy discussing with his friends. First he discussed the periodic table, the different elements of the periodic table, and he discussed certain chemicals, the mixing with other chemicals. Do not use too little of this, do not use too much of that, do not use too much of that and mix it with that. There might be an explosion, be careful how you use it. So basically it's giving out lectures on the manufacturing of chemical bombs, not, I wouldn't say, assemble the bomb itself, but giving out information, lectures on the manufacturing of chemical bombs. And of interest was the wires on one of the conversations that he had with his friend from Port Shepstone. Don't forget to bring the wires along. So that was of interest. That was of interest, and that sort of picked up my tentacles, so to speak, picked up my ears. And then I noted that, but then there was no special need for me to run to Jimmy Taylor or P.L. Detroit, because instructions were that diarize everything, etc., and put it on our table.
So, if I hear you correctly, your version is that you know, because you're hearing it and you have tape recordings of it, Dr. Haffejee instructing others how to make chemical bombs.
Yes.
And you know what ingredients are necessary and what things are needed, such as wires.
Yes.
Now, did you think he was just doing it for academic interest?
Not at that point in time, because what Matthew had told us about his activity, because what she told us and what I heard on the tomato, on the recording, was making sense. Because we had to evaluate the information first received, and the only way to evaluate it is to listen to what the tomato has to release to us. And what it did tell us was the intelligence that we gathered, and it shows that yes, okay, so Mati was being truthful in that aspect.
So Mati had accused him of being involved in making bombs and told that to you.
Yes.
And then you have the potential evidence of Mati Governor, and then you have the tomato recordings about these lectures on how to make chemical bombs.
Yes.
So what more did you need? Why didn't you take action? Because surely the public was in imminent danger.
I can understand what your lordship is saying, but might I say that my instructions were to listen to that, diarize it, and put it on Jimmy Taylor's table.
Yes, I know the call wasn't yours. That was not your decision to make.
Yes.
But going on in your head, given what you had,
yes.
Well, let me put it more bluntly.
Yes.
If in fact that was the evidence that you had,
yes,
you had evidence from the girlfriend who was in and out of that apartment,
yes,
saying that this is what he was doing.
yes.
You have tape recordings
Yes.
of him allegedly teaching people how to make bombs, what they need, the ingredients
Yes.
and the materials.
Yes.
Now, if in fact that was the evidence, and let's just hypothetically say in fact that's what you had,
Yes.
then surely you were duty bound to advise your superiors that the public was in imminent danger. You didn't know when this would happen, but you had a guy here who was instructing others how to make bombs. You didn't know what the others were going to be doing, when they might do it, and who they might target. But the public was in imminent danger. What more did you need to take action?
My Lord, I can understand your line of thought right now, but at that point in time, I did what I was asked to do, and that's it. I did not really think of that aspect as what your Lordship puts it at. But certainly, with what you say, it does make sense. But I, for myself, at that point in time, did not have that line of thought. As far as I'm concerned, put it on in writing and submit. Done. That's it.
So was there no discussion about the very real risk that lives could be lost, people could suffer serious injuries, while you guys were hanging around, putting them under surveillance for a couple of months? You didn't know who these other people were who were coming for lectures. It was okay just to sit back for 4 months.
Well, the daily recordings were also being listened to by Jimmy Taylor, as well as phone calls by Captain Detroit as well. And they were gathering intelligence, and the file was building up. So it's my turn now to listen into the calls. I'm listening to into the tomato. I'm listening to that. I write up my diary and submit. And then afterwards get back to observation and surveillance duties. So exactly as how your Lordship puts it, I can understand where you're coming from and what you're saying. And I will not discount that. However, at that point in time, this is what took place, and this is the role that I played.
So was there never a discussion about the potential imminent threat to the public?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge, Your Lordship.
You see, I just find that somewhat improbable that the security branch allegedly knows that somebody is teaching others how to make bombs, potentially making bombs himself, and immediate action isn't taken. While we're on that score, you said that you had undergone weapons training. It was somewhere up in the Transvaal.
You mean at the Benoni Mechanical School?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it wasn't weapons training. It was, they showed us pictures of landmines, limpet mines, timing devices, detonators, plastic explosives, all, etc. And also assembly of bombs, limpet mines, many, many limped mines, and then your maximum charge and stuff like that.
So if
it's
you
not
saw
that, it's not that they physically gave us the weapons in our hands and trained us. No.
Right. But do you believe that if you saw explosive material lying around, you would recognize it?
At that point in time, the type of explosives that were circulating, yes.
And did you find any such materials in Dr. Haffergee's flat?
No. Not, my lord.
So it's the evidence of Mighty Governor that there was shrapnel, pieces of metal. She couldn't tell us whether it was in bags or how it was contained, but in the flat. Did you ever come across?
I never came across that.
Yes.
I never came across that, and that's news to me, my lord.
Yes, and of course, if you or somebody had come across it,
yes,
you would have immediately taken action on it.
Absolutely.
So I think we can accept that that was a fabrication on the part of Marty Govender.
Besides the information that she had given us, I can't trust her.
Yes.
I cannot trust her.
Well, we have already submitted to this honourable court that she was an unreliable witness and had lied under oath multiple times. So, in your evidence in chief, you related a story of how at one point in time there was an attempt to follow the two individuals
Yes.
who have been attending these lectures. Can I just ask, was it always the same individuals or sometimes others?
Well, thing is this, that Dr. Haffergy would greet them, but in the Muslim way of greeting, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. So every time I hear that, then I believe that the other two people are from, well, being Muslims. Is it the same two people? Because there's lots of Muslims who use a greeting to greet each other. It's difficult to say. We did not have technology in place to video record images, etc. Photographs could have been taken, but the way the VW Beetle was parked, they jump out of the vehicle and then walk towards the entrance of, well, to the floor to get to the first floor. And it's difficult to take photographs. When you park, you can't even park on the inside of Antelope Towers on the ground floor. You can't even park over there because the parking is so tight over there. There's owners, well, people staying there have their allocated parking bays, and then there's other parking bays over there, and there's just one spot left, and that's the spot that the yellow Beetle used. So that was difficult. If names came out, then certainly that would throw some sort of light on their identity.
So now, was this the routine every Thursday? The same yellow VW Beetle would come?
Every Thursday.
And are you making the assumption that it probably was the same two individuals, given they used the same car?
Assuming.
And this was every Thursday for some 4 months?
Yeah, 3 to 4 months, somewhere there.
And with every Thursday, was it the very same lectures, or did the lectures deal with other matters as well?
There were other lectures given on, like, magazines of the African National Congress, like Sashaba. I think another one was Ukuloleko or something of that sort. And then, of course, the Communist Party of South Africa, literature on that was read out.
So there was also political instruction?
It was political knowledge. Right.
And on the so-called bomb making, clearly, it doesn't take every single Thursday to give instruction on how to make a chemical bomb. That would have only been a handful of lectures, or just a few.
Sometimes there'd be lectures, and then before they leave, they have a bit of chemical mixture discussions. It's not like only lectures for this Thursday night, next week that Thursday lectures again. No, there was a combination of both.
So at least after a few weeks, the students would have been in a position that had the know-how to go out and make these chemical bombs.
Yes.
Yes, which reinforces the point that the security branch was aware of that danger, and yet from what you're telling us, there was only one attempt to follow them.
At that point in time, observation surveillance was Warrant Officer Perumal and Warrant Officer Mudley. And they lost sight of the vehicle because that driver was driving very fast and they lost sight of the vehicle. Whether that vehicle reached Port Shepstone or where that vehicle went to, I've got to say this, my lord, that I still heard voices in the lounge. So whether it's the same two people who took that vehicle and left, or it's somebody else living in that block of building who got into the vehicle and left.
You see, it all just sounds somewhat improbable. You know, life and limb is at risk here. And yet you're telling us that on only one occasion did the surveillance team try to follow these individuals and find where they were going. If they didn't succeed on the one occasion, why didn't they try again and again until they found out exactly who they were?
Well, as what I'm saying, that it's not every Thursday night that the same team was keeping observation, etc. There were different teams as well.
It doesn't matter who was there, because
but whether they conducted
presumably the team that failed would have reported that. And if in fact we were dealing with bombs and life and limb were at risk,
yes,
then on the next occasion you would have had a plan in place, perhaps with more individuals and more cars, to ensure that you did trace them.
I agree with you.
So would you then agree that the failure to do that casts into doubt a lot of the evidence you're giving us?
No, my lord, I'm informing the court about exactly what I know, what I saw, and that's it. I'm not speaking a word of lie. And if the court finds me speaking a lie and you want to put me into prison, please do so, my lord.
But you accept that it's just astonishing that there was only this one attempt to follow these individuals?
The time when I was there, at that moment in time, yes, that was just one attempt, done. The time when the other teams took over there, whether they had instructed a surveillance team to take over and continue surveillance, and one team remains behind as observation, I cannot comment upon that. What I do know is that we were not supposed to know, because we work on a need-to-know basis. However, we did come to know, because when one team breaks, the next team, 15 minutes before you break, the next team comes in, so therefore we knew who those members were by the sight.
But surely, yes, you need to know, but only up to a point. It can't be counterproductive. If you're all involved in the same investigation, you surely need to know what is going on. And the team that finishes up, would need to tell you, well, we've seen nothing, or we've seen a lot, and this is what we saw. Keep a watch out for this. Or we tried to do something, but it didn't work out. That's right,
my lord. So this is what I'm saying, that although we were told that we work on a need-to-know basis and that one team must not know the other observation and surveillance team, however, it doesn't make sense, because when the other team came on duty 15 minutes before, the one team used to brief the other team. In other words, not all members of the one team, one member of the one team briefs another member of the other team. So therefore we came to know who these people were.
Well, I must put it to you that if there was potential bomb making going on, which then suggests that life and limb were at risk, and that these two individuals were possibly other members of a cell who could potentially go ahead and execute such explosions, that the security branch, with all the massive resources at its disposal in terms of personnel and vehicles to save life and limb, would have come up with an operation, a plan, to track down those two individuals. And it isn't rocket science. You know when they're coming, you know approximately when they're leaving. So I'm putting it to you that if in fact he was sitting on that information, that is what would have happened.
I can agree with my lord, but that did not take place. That did not take place.
So then I have to ask you, was it really bombs?
Was it really?
Was it really the making of bombs? Was this the intelligence you were picking up on through the tomato and through Mighty Governor?
Yes.
Well, I think we already know that we have to treat whatever Mighty Governor says with a great deal of caution. So let's just exclude her from the process for the moment. Was it really bombs you were hearing about on the tomato?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, then I have to say that I personally find it terribly hard to reconcile the lack of action, given what the security branch apparently knew what was going down and what the imminent danger was.
I understand you.
It stretches belief to breaking point that they didn't apprehend the other two.
That did not take place. They were not apprehended.
My lord,
Yeah.
I don't know where Mr. Barney is going with this evidence, but the witness has already said that it was not his call to make. He's only giving evidence on what he observed and what he did.
Yeah. Mr. Van?
Well, my lord, I've been putting it to this witness that because of the lack of action in the circumstances, it's casting serious doubt on the evidence he has given in relation to the apparent dangers, supposedly chemical bombs and the like. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Now, you say in the next paragraph, that's paragraph 50, that it was then decided to observe him for a full 24 hours. We had 6 teams comprising 2 members per team and per vehicle. We did a general observation of his flat, the entrance and exit at the hospital, but noticed nothing besides his normal comings and goings. The surveillance and weekend from Friday to Sunday also proved fruitless. When we observed the flat, it always appeared quiet. So what you're saying in that paragraph tends to support what I'm putting to you, Mr. Gopal, that in fact you were finding very little on Dr. Haffergy and his so-called accomplices.
Well, over that weekend, the surveillance and a weekend one from Friday to Sunday also proved fruitless, and we observed that his flat always appeared quiet. Now, from what I understand, Dr. Haffergy was not around. I know at one point in time, it was on a Friday, he went to Overport City. There's a mosque nearby there. Near Overport City, there is a mosque there. I guess he went to do afternoon prayers. But then Fridays it was very quiet. Therefore, to Sundays it was quiet. We didn't observe him. We thought that if we take him on for the entire weekend, we'd pick up something, but nothing.
All right, let's move on to the apprehension of Dr. Haffergy, which you have described as an effective kidnapping. Do you know why it was that they decided to deal with Dr. Haffergy in this particular way? They decided not to arrest him in the normal course, not to read him his rights, and not to take him to Fisher Street.
No, my lord. I can't comment on that.
You can't comment on it because you're not party to those plans?
No. What I'm saying is that we were told that he was going to be arrested. But the manner in which he was taken to police custody, that's not formal arrest. So I was rather surprised.
Because at the time you expected the normal practice to be followed, and it wasn't.
It wasn't. There wasn't there wasn't a warrant of arrest. There wasn't like tapping on the shoulder to take you into your personal possession, read out a charge against you, warn you in terms of judges' rules, etc. None of these was complied with.
And you were surprised about that?
I was very much surprised about that.
So, looking back on that, none of the normal requirements such as reading in the judge's rules were observed. He wasn't taken to Hoosen House. He wasn't booked in. No paperwork was done. Instead, he was taken straight to Brighton Beach Police Station.
Yes.
There, he wasn't booked in either. He wasn't even taken to an office. He was taken to the basement.
The basement.
So, at the time, what was going through your head as to what was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. What was going on? Because, if you're going to arrest someone, then there's protocol to follow. It's not happening. He's not been taken to Hoosen House, to our officers. He's been taken over to Brighton Beach Police Station. And I found that out when Shrewd Governor had radioed. And Major Ben said, sorry, his place of questioning will be Brighton Beach Police Station. That's when I came to first know about it. We end up over there, and as what you say, my lord, no going to the charge office, no booking into the books, etc., no processing, and walk straight into the questioning room right at the end, and that's what happened.
So you then knew that this was some kind of special case, and your superiors had something else in mind?
Well, it didn't occur to me at that time that this is some sort of a special case, but I know that the reason why I was arrested, taken to police custody, was related to what we had picked up on the spools, on the recordings, etc., etc. So, yes, in that respect, special case.
Well, no, because surely the security branch have recordings with dozens of people who weren't subjected to this unusual treatment. It's a special case because he wasn't taken to Hoosen House, he wasn't booked in, he wasn't arrested, no paperwork was done, he wasn't taken to an office, he was taken to a basement.
Yes, in that sense, yes.
Yes. And now, looking back on hindsight, you do know now why. Rather, you know now why he wasn't taken to Hoosen House. There initially was no paperwork.
Well,
and he was taken to a discreet basement.
I agree with you, Lord, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what took place and the reason why he was taken straight over there, etc.
Right. Well, we have to spell that out, and please would you assist this honourable court?
Sure.
Why was that approach taken on that morning?
Why was that approach taken on that morning? He could have been questioned at Hoosen House. Why questioned at Brighton Beach? Why there? Who had thought? Sorry, my lord. Who had thought about or planned originally about Brighton Beach? It's not a case where Captain Pierre Detroit did not know about that room because he came out in his car. Out comes Dr. Haffergy, and Dr. Haffergy is behind Captain Taylor. Jimmy Taylor is behind Dr. Haffergy, and I'm following, and then Captain Taylor is walking straight towards that interrogation room. So it seems like he already knew about that. I'm just surmising now.
Yes, well, he must have known. He must have known ahead of time that that's where he was going to take him.
Because he knew where to go to.
Yes, and you said it wasn't rocket science to work out why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and why?
Yeah, well, Well, now when I sit back and think of it, I
Yes,
can
with
see.
hindsight, yes.
Yes, when I sit back and think of it and see what and go through the events that occurred, we can understand why. Because obviously, I mean, if that type of interrogation took place in Hoosen House, I'm just wondering. Because remember that there's no police cells at Hoosen House. It's just like like the head office of the security branch. We use various police stations all over. Then of course you've got...
That's for accommodation. At
So-
Hoosen House, correct me if I'm wrong, it's in downtown Durban.
Yes,
It's on a street, they're pedestrians, they're cars.
yes,
People could see you going into the building and coming out.
absolutely.
Inside the building, there perhaps other staff members, maybe even other detainees, coming and going in the corridors.
Yes,
So, would I be
To
right in
avoid
saying that they wanted to avoid all of that?
yes,
They wanted to get him out the way. They wanted to make sure nobody knew that he had been abducted.
that would be reasonable.
Yes.
Yes,
And that's why he wasn't taken to Fisher Street, he was taken to Brighton Beach, which is a bit out of the way. It's not in downtown Durban, it's much quieter.
I understand, my lord.
And would also be right in saying he wasn't taken to an office in,
No, that
in
wasn't.
Brighton
That was
Beach.
a basement,
He was
yeah.
taken to the basement,
That
as you
was more
pointed
like
out.
a warehouse. That was more like a warehouse. It's huge. It's huge.
Yes. And so why a basement rather than an office?
Well, I think in a basement you can drown sound. You can drown sound in a basement because it's right at the end of the building, point one. Point two, in an office, one office next to each other, there are staff, whether it's policemen, policewomen, or admin staff, or civilian staff. But when the police station, they will all come to know, hey, what's going on over here? You can hear screamings. And everybody else not connected with that investigation would come running into that office and would see what's going on. Whereas over here, this is very private, it's secluded, it's out of view of the public, etc., etc.
That's
I guess
right.
so.
That's right. So they decided to choose a storeroom in a basement, out of sight, out of earshot, and also where things could get a little messy. They, with hindsight, would you agree that they knew that they were going to be torturing this man and it was going to get messy?
When I sit back now and think about it, it's quite obvious that they knew of the final consequences.
Now, in your evidence in chief, you mentioned that he was wearing a safari suit,
Yes.
and you said it was a short-sleeved safari suit. And it was also your evidence that he was not wearing a shirt underneath the safari suit.
No, not.
And yet, when he was discovered dead in cell number 2, he was wearing a long sleeve shirt.
And from what Mr. McDonald had shown me this morning,
Yes. So, my Lord, just for the record, we put up a list of exhibits from the first inquest as L12.
Yeah. L12, yeah.
L12, yes. And on the first page, at the bottom, there's exhibit G2.
Yes.
And that's described a shirt in brackets in Afrikaans hemp. And then under that is exhibit G3, which is the item is a jacket in Afrikaans in brackets baiki.
These were not available at the first inquest.
No, my Lord.
Or they were there at the first inquest.
I'll have to check with my learned junior that they were available at the first inquest, but they're no longer available.
Oh, okay.
So the security branch is saying, well, they did take possession of a shirt and jacket, and then presumably the bottom part of the safari suit that had been cut up following the examination by Professor Gordon. My Lord, it is the evidence of, we checked with the family members, that's Sarah and Ishmael Haffejee. They advised my instructing attorney that they did not receive these items back, and to the best of their recollection, he wouldn't have worn a shirt underneath a safari suit. That wasn't the style in those days.
I see that they are talking about their vest here.
And there's a vest, although conceivably I suppose a vest could have been worn under a safari suit.
I remember those days, sleeveless vest you could put under the safari top.
Yes.
But not the long-sleeved vest.
A long sleeve shirt would have looked odd under a safari suit. Now there's some debate, although I think you're clear in your mind as to where the basement was.
Yes.
And your evidence in chief, you mentioned that while the torture and abuse was going on, you watched proceedings, you said from and correct me if I'm wrong, a pillar near the entrance to that storeroom.
Yes.
Now we just want to put up some photos. We'll first start with that's the where the toilet was. If you could go to the other way. Keep going. Keep going. Right, stop there. So that's the first area where you thought where there was a possibility that he had been interrogated. You recall that's right next to the car park.
Yes.
There's a very short corridor, toilet on the left, some kind of machinery room on the right, one other room on the left as well, and then at the bottom was this room, which still appears to be a storeroom of sorts. But eventually you decided that it couldn't be here. I think that the main reason you gave was there was no access to a corridor to the charge room. The only way to get to the charge room was to exit the building, so next to the car park, and then either walk upstairs or go around the corner to the charge office.
I'm listening.
And you then drew a diagram of what you believed the basement area you were looking for looked like. And if you like, we can show you that diagram.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Why I say that the office at the end looked more like it is, for one, it's like not at the beginning of the building, but it's at the end of the building. And as what I had said, that he was taken right to the far end, and there's nothing behind. If you look at the police station, there's nothing behind that. So that's like the end, and that's a huge office like what I've seen, and there is a toilet. So when you're coming out, or when you're going in, the toilet on the left hand side. When you're coming out, the toilet is on the right hand side. So that made sense as well. So it's not only at the end, which like agrees with my thoughts, because I know he was taken to the end, but that the toilet is on the right hand side. So therefore I settled for that.
Yeah, well, it depends which way you're facing. If you're facing down the corridor from the entrance, it will be on the left hand side.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes. All right. Although in this photo, in the middle of the room, there appears to be what might be described as pillars or a concrete support. And I just wanted to check with you that it wasn't those pillars or concrete supports that you were standing next to.
No, my lord, not that.
All right. If you can then scroll up. Sorry. No, I mean down into the document. Okay, keep going. All right. There. We just stop there for a moment. Then we ask you to draw a diagram of what you thought the place looked like. And then we walk to the southwest corner of the building. And please scroll down. I think we can go straight. If you perhaps just stop there for a moment. And my Lord will see that we then walk to the southwest corner at the very end of the building. And from there we went down some stairs. And if we can just scroll down further. Okay, that was put together, I think, by one of the officers. Please keep going. Keep going. So that's then, you can see the stairs on the left-hand side, and then you can see the corridor that goes straight down. It's a fairly longish corridor. The immediate left is the urinals where there was a toilet. We can keep scrolling down. That's another shot of the corridor. Unfortunately, it was filled up with water, so most of us couldn't get in there. Keep scrolling down. Another shot of the corridor. Keep going down. That's a shot of the room where the urinals and toilet was. That, I believe, is a photograph of the room containing the geysers. This is a photograph of the second room, I believe, also on the left-hand side of the corridor. And then if we scroll down to the last room, so it's this room where I believe you are saying the interrogation actually took place. It's the room at the bottom of that corridor. As you can see, it is a large room.
Okay.
At the far bottom, there are some shelves. On the left-hand side, there are windows. They're not big windows. They're small windows.
Okay.
At the top. There are no pillars that I can see, except there is this concrete support that juts out on the right-hand side.
That's what I'm referring to.
Are you saying that you're standing next to that support?
So he's standing in front of me. Okay, so it's in the right-hand side. So that would be the pillar. Yes.
Now, my learned friend for the state raised a potential problem. He pointed out correctly that these rooms fronted on the road, which is now Hoosen Haffejee Road, and on the other side of the road are residential houses,
Yes.
which presumably were also there in the 1970s. And Advocate MacDonald just questioned whether they would use a room like this, which was not far from the residential houses, and potentially they could hear, given that there are windows.
Yes.
Although the windows are not, maybe we can somehow enlarge that. The windows are not particularly big windows, and presumably those windows were closed. That it may have a muffling effect on the sound.
Okay.
Do you recall whether there might have been curtains over the windows at the time?
Well, Lord, I didn't take notice. Trying to recall.
If I recall your evidence in chief, I don't think you could recall whether there were windows or not.
That's what I'm just thinking of now when I look at that window. And I talk about curtains, and I just can't seem to recall.
if we could turn to the evidence that is reflected in paragraph 58 of your statement. My Lord, that's on page 1747. And you also made reference to this incident in your evidence in chief. You said that at a certain point in time he was begging for water, so Jimmy Taylor dragged him by his neck to the toilet. You stood at the door. Taylor opened the toilet pan and shoved Haffejee's head into the toilet, shouting at him to drink that water. And because Taylor was exerting such force on his head into the toilet, when Haffejee pushed himself up, Taylor let go of him and he hit himself against the wall with tremendous force, which caused him to fall on the ground. And there he was lying in pain, his body shaking and shivering. So I just want to establish from you it's not clear to us where that toilet was situated. But do you recall whether Haffejee was placed directly in front of the toilet? Or perhaps on the side, and where the wall was situated for him to have knocked his head against the wall?
Okay, so there's a toilet pan, right? And so I'm standing by the door, and then Jimmy Taylor pushes Dr. Haffergy's neck down into the toilet pan and carried on pushing, and as he's exerting force, Dr. Haffergy is going the reverse way. He's pushing backwards, and eventually with such tremendous force that I think Captain Jimmy Taylor could have realized that, look, it's quite a heavy push, and then he let go of his neck, and with that pushing back effect, he hit right back and his head hit the back of the wall, and
yes.
He fell.
Well, that you know, if we're in the right place, which is that room with the urinals where there was apparently a toilet.
Toilet, yes.
Where was the toilet situated in that room? Was it in the corner next to a wall?
It's difficult to recall, my lord.
Because the wall had to be pretty close to the toilet in order for his head to hit the wall.
Yeah, so it was in that room, and for him to have hit his head like backwards, for his backwards head to hit the wall, it couldn't be a very long distance away from where the toilet pan was. That's
well, it couldn't have been more than perhaps a meter.
I can't gauge, my lord. I can't gauge.
Well, if it was anywhere further, then it would be unlikely, that maneuver could.
I guess with that type of force that he pushed back with, and there was no wall over there, he'd probably fall flat on his back.
Yes, and it's also your evidence, if I'm not wrong, that he received multiple blows to the head as well.
During the assaults?
Yes.
Yes.
My Lord, I see that it's close to 4 p.m. I still have a way to go with this witness. I wonder whether this might be the appropriate time for the adjournment. My Lord, before we adjourn, I would like to just bring to your attention what we anticipate happening in the balance of the week.
Yeah.
My Lord, the investigating officers have located the whereabouts of Constable Mordia, who was present in the charge office. Yes,
okay.
The statement was taken and we received it this afternoon. He is based in Johannesburg, my lord. So we, with the leave of the court, we have arranged for Big Beats to transmit his evidence from Johannesburg into this court.
Yeah.
We've asked Big Beats whether they can be available to carry out the transmission either Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. I'm hoping that I will finish my cross-examination of this witness by lunchtime tomorrow, and if so, we can then proceed with Constable Nordia in the afternoon. If we finish a bit too late, then we can deal with Constable Nordia on Thursday morning. And then the last witness, my lord, will be Brigadier Marion, who's the private investigator for the family.
Yeah.
He will testify on the modus operandi of the security branch and his expert views on this case. We don't believe that his evidence will be terribly long, so we're hoping that we could potentially wrap up the inquest, or at least the oral evidence part of the inquest, on Thursday at the latest.
Well, we have to, because
Lord, I should say we haven't yet put up Brigadier Marion's affidavit. He's been asked to listen to all the evidence, and then he will finalise his affidavit at that point.
Yeah, obviously we have to finalize the oral evidence by end of the day on Thursday, because Ms. Keshav is not available on Friday anyway. And looks like this court, I've given this court to the judge president, because I knew we had to finish our oral evidence on Thursday anyway.
Yes, my lord. That is our anticipation.
Okay.
We should be able to finish on Thursday.
All right. No, that's all right. Okay, then, Mr. Kohar, you'll finish your evidence tomorrow. I'm adjourning this proceedings till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay? Court is adjourned.
Thank you, Lord.
Yeah.